My fiancé ended our engagement and demanded the ring back immediately. He assumed I would be too heartbroken to check the receipt. That was his first mistake. The engagement ring was beautiful, but it had never felt entirely like mine. Caleb chose it without me. He said he wanted the proposal to be a surprise, and I believed him. The ring had a thin gold band and a pale green stone that caught the light whenever I moved my hand. He proposed on a hiking trail in front of a waterfall. He cried. I cried. A stranger took our picture, and Caleb posted it before we even reached the car. For the next year, every conversation about the wedding ended with him saying, "We have time." Then his behavior changed. He became critical of everything I did. He said I was too independent, too busy, too difficult to impress. He began spending money on expensive dinners with friends while telling me we needed to cut the wedding budget. One night he came home and said, "I don't think I can marry someone who makes me feel inadequate." I asked whether he wanted to end the engagement. He said yes. Then he looked at my hand and said, "I need the ring back tonight." I removed it and placed it on the table. He reached for it, but I put my hand over the box. "I'll return it properly," I said. He laughed. "It's not complicated, it's mine." Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I did not know, and neither did he. The next morning I searched through the files in our desk. I found the jeweler's invoice, the insurance policy, and the credit card statement. The ring had been purchased on a joint account. The receipt listed Caleb as the purchaser, but the insurance policy listed both of us as covered owners because he had added it after the proposal. I called the jeweler and asked what the return policy was. The ring was not eligible for a cash refund because it had been customized, but it could be exchanged for store credit under certain conditions. I called the insurer and asked how the policy worked after an ended engagement. They told me to document the transfer and obtain a signed receipt from the person receiving the ring. I asked Caleb to meet me at the jeweler. He arrived angry. He said I was making a simple breakup ugly. He said I was trying to keep the ring because I wanted money. I told him I was not keeping it. I was returning it with documentation. The jeweler inspected the stone. Then the manager pulled up the purchase record. There had been another ring on the same order, a matching band, paid for with the same account, to be delivered later. Caleb had never mentioned it. The manager asked whether I knew about the second item. I said no. Caleb interrupted and said it was a mistake. The manager looked at the order and said the second ring had been engraved with the initials CR. My initials were not CR. Caleb's ex-girlfriend's initials were. The store went silent. I looked at him. He said the ring was for a family member. Then he said it was a gift he had never given. Then he said the initials were a coincidence. The explanation changed 3 times before the manager finished printing the transfer receipt. I did not accuse him of anything. I did not need to. The truth was standing between us in a paper bag. I returned the engagement ring. The jeweler issued a store credit in Caleb's name, not mine, because he had been the purchaser. I signed the transfer and left with nothing except my half of the joint account records. 2 weeks later, Caleb asked me to meet him. He said the other ring had been a sentimental mistake and that he had never cheated. I asked why he had requested a second ring for his ex while planning our wedding. He said he had been confused. I said, "You were confused when you ordered it. You were confused when you hid it. You were only certain when you asked me to stop asking questions." He told me I was punishing him over a piece of jewelry. I said, "The jewelry was never the issue. The receipt was." The final settlement of our joint account showed that Caleb had spent more than I knew on the engagement ring, the hidden ring, and several hotel stays. I did not pursue every expense. I simply closed the account, separated my finances, and moved on. Months later, the jeweler mailed me a thank you card for returning the ring with proper documentation. It was a small gesture, but I kept it. The ring had represented a future Caleb promised me. The receipt represented the future he had been hiding. I was sad to lose one. I was grateful to find the other. My boyfriend told me to move out the same night he broke up with me. He assumed the apartment belonged to him because his name was on the mailbox. He forgot who had actually read the contract. When Marcus ended our relationship, he did it like he was firing an employee. He stood in the living room, pointed toward the hallway, and said, "You need to be gone by Friday." I thought he was joking. We had lived together for 3 years. The apartment was in a building owned by his aunt, and Marcus had always used that fact to make me feel temporary. He called it his place, even though I paid half the rent, half the utilities, and most of the costs of furnishing it. When I reminded him that I was listed on the lease, he laughed. "You're on the paperwork because my aunt was being nice," he said. "Don't make this complicated." I asked whether he was ending the relationship. He said yes. I asked whether he wanted me to leave immediately. He said, "I want you out before I change my mind." I nodded and walked into the bedroom. Marcus expected shouting. He expected me to cry, ask where I would go, and promise to do anything to keep the apartment. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched for a new place to live. The next morning, I called the property manager, not Marcus's aunt, the independent manager who handled the building. She confirmed that I was a co-tenant and that neither of us could remove the other without following the lease terms. She also told me that Marcus had missed 2 rent payments. I was shocked. I had been sending my half of the rent to him every month because he said his aunt preferred a single payment. He had been depositing my money, then paying late. I asked for a copy of the ledger. There it was. My transfers, his partial payments, and late fees he had never mentioned. I did not confront him immediately. I needed to know how far the problem went. I checked the utility accounts and discovered that Marcus had changed the mailing address on the electricity bill to his mother's house. He had been telling everyone that I had stopped contributing to the household while quietly using my payments to cover his debt. That night, he came home with a friend and started moving his belongings into the second bedroom. He said, "You should be grateful I'm giving you a few days." I said, "You don't have the authority to give me days." He looked at me as if I had spoken another language. The next morning, I sent the property manager the payment records. She scheduled a meeting with both of us. Marcus arrived confident. He brought his mother, who immediately began telling me that I was being vindictive. The manager placed a folder on the table. She said, "This is a tenancy issue, not a family argument." Then she explained that Marcus had been in breach of the lease because of the missed payments, and I had been the only tenant whose transfers were documented consistently. Marcus turned pale. His mother asked whether I was trying to take the apartment from him. I said no. I'm trying to leave without being blamed for debts I didn't create. I had already found a studio nearby. I offered to take over the lease alone for 30 days while I moved out, provided Marcus signed a formal release and reimbursed the missing rent from my transfers. He refused. So the manager began the formal process required by the lease. Marcus learned that he could not simply throw me out, and I learned that I had more protection than he had spent 3 years allowing me to believe. We were out of the apartment within 6 weeks. I moved into my studio. Marcus moved in with his mother. He called me after the final inspection and said I had humiliated him. I said, "You tried to make a breakup into an eviction." I only insisted that the rules apply to both of us. He said he never wanted to hurt me. I answered, "Then stop confusing control with protection." A month later, the property manager contacted me. Marcus had asked to rent another unit in the building. She declined because of the unpaid balance and the falsified payment history. He told friends that I had ruined his chance to keep his home. The truth was less dramatic. He had mistaken access for ownership, and he had mistaken my patience for helplessness. I still have the first key I used for that apartment. It sits in a small bowl by my new front door, not because I miss the place, but because it reminds me that a key can open a room without giving anyone the right to control the person inside it. My ex dumped me in our shared group chat and waited for everyone to watch me fall apart. I said nothing. 2 days later, the same group chat exposed the reason he had done it. I knew Oliver was unhappy, but I thought unhappy meant we would talk. He had been distant for months. He stopped making plans and started treating every question like an accusation. If I asked what time he would be home, he said I was monitoring him. If I asked whether he still wanted the relationship, he said I was creating problems. Our friends noticed it too. They would invite us both to dinner, and Oliver would arrive late, spend the entire evening on his phone, and then complain that no one included him in the conversation. The strange part was that he still wanted to be seen as a good boyfriend. He posted old photos of us online and wrote captions about loyalty. In private, he told me he felt trapped. One Friday afternoon, our entire friend group received a message from him. It said that he had decided to end our relationship because he needed peace, that he had tried everything, and that he hoped everyone would respect his decision. He did not tell me privately first. He announced it to 11 people at once. Then he added, "I'm not going to explain myself further." My phone began vibrating immediately. People asked whether I was okay. One friend called 3 times. Someone else sent me a message saying, "Please don't respond while you're upset." I stared at the screen and realized Oliver had designed the breakup like a performance. He wanted an audience. He wanted the group to see him as the brave person ending a difficult relationship. So I did not respond. For the rest of the day, I stayed silent. I turned off my phone, went to my sister's apartment, and slept on her couch. The next morning, Oliver sent me a private message asking why I was ignoring him. I replied, "You ended the relationship publicly. I'm respecting your decision publicly." He called me cruel. By Sunday night, his story had changed. He told people I had been emotionally unavailable and that he had been planning to leave for months. He said my silence proved I never cared. I still did not answer in the group chat. Then one of our friends, Priya, called me. She sounded uncomfortable. She said Oliver had been asking whether anyone had heard from a woman named Tessa. I knew the name. Tessa was someone from his gym. He had told me they were training partners. Priya asked whether I knew that Oliver had been sending Tessa messages every night for the last 6 weeks. I did not. I checked the shared tablet we had used for streaming. Oliver had forgotten to sign out of one of his accounts. I found nothing dramatic at first, just ordinary messages, jokes, and conversations about workouts. Then I found a message from Oliver sent 3 days before the group chat breakup. It said, "Once I end things, I'll finally be free to take you out properly." The next message from Tessa said, "I thought you were already ending it." Oliver replied, "I'm doing it this week. I just need to make sure she doesn't make me look like the bad guy." I read that sentence several times. He had not wanted a private conversation because a private conversation would have required him to answer questions. He wanted to build a public narrative before anyone could ask why he was already promising dates to someone else. I had 2 choices. I could post every screenshot and turn the situation into the spectacle he wanted, or I could tell the truth only to the people affected by his story. I chose the second option. I sent the group one message. Oliver and I are no longer together, and I will respect that. I'm not going to discuss our private relationship here. However, I want to correct one point. He did not decide to leave before becoming involved with someone else. I have evidence of messages promising another woman a relationship before he announced the breakup. I'm not posting them. If anyone needs clarification about something he told you, ask him directly. Then I left the group. For several hours, nothing happened. That evening, Tessa messaged me. She said she had believed Oliver was single. When she confronted him, he accused her of ruining his life and told her I had manipulated everyone against him. She blocked him. The next day, 3 of our friends did the same. Oliver called me from a new number and said I had destroyed his reputation. I told him, "I did not destroy anything. I stopped helping you decorate it." He said he wanted to apologize in person. I said no. A month later, I created a new group chat with the friends I trusted. We called it No Oliver Updates. It lasted for years. The best part was that nobody ever needed to explain why. My fiancé canceled our wedding 2 weeks before the ceremony because he needed to find himself. He thought I would spend the next year waiting for him. Instead, I gave our wedding date to someone who actually wanted to be there. When Lucas proposed, he cried so hard that he could barely get the ring onto my finger. He told me he had never been more certain of anything in his life. 18 months later, he called off the wedding by saying he was no longer certain of anything. The ceremony was scheduled for a Saturday in October. Most of the important things had already been paid for. The venue, the photographer, the flowers, and a small dinner for our families. I had spent months coordinating details while Lucas worked longer hours and promised he would handle the things I couldn't see. 2 weeks before the ceremony, he asked me to meet him in a coffee shop. He arrived early and had already removed his engagement ring. That was how I knew the conversation was not going to be about seating arrangements. He said he loved me, but love was not enough. He said he had spent so much time becoming the person everyone expected him to be that he no longer knew what he wanted. He said marriage felt like a door closing. I asked whether there was someone else. He said no so quickly that I knew he had practiced the answer. I asked whether he wanted to postpone the wedding. He said he didn't know. I asked whether he wanted to remain engaged. He said he didn't know. Finally, I asked the only question that mattered. Are you choosing this relationship? Lucas looked down at his coffee. No, he said. I nodded. Then the wedding is canceled. He looked up. I thought we could take a break. A break from the wedding or a break from me? He did not answer. By the time I got home, his mother had already called my mother. Everyone seemed to have a different opinion about what I should do. His family said I was being dramatic. My aunt said I should wait at least 6 months before making a permanent decision. Lucas texted that he needed space, but hoped I would not do anything irreversible. The next morning, I called the venue. The coordinator, Denise, had been with us from the beginning. She listened while I explained what happened. Then she told me the venue had a policy allowing couples to transfer their date to another event if the replacement booking had a similar value. I asked whether I could give the date to someone else. Denise said, "Do you know anyone who needs a venue?" I did. My younger sister Mara had been engaged for 6 years. She and her girlfriend had postponed their wedding twice because of money, then canceled the plans entirely after helping me pay for a medical emergency in our family. I called Mara and asked whether she and Elise wanted an October wedding. There was a long silence. Then Mara started crying. 3 days later, we transferred the date. The florist changed the color palette. The photographer adjusted the contract. The caterer agreed to keep the menu and reduce the guest count. Every vendor was kinder than I expected. Some even offered discounts when they learned why the date had become available. Lucas found out from his cousin, who saw Mara's announcement online. He called me that night. "You gave our wedding away," he asked. "It wasn't our wedding anymore. You could have waited. You told me you didn't know whether you wanted to marry me. I said I needed time. You asked for time. You did not ask me to freeze my life until you made up your mind." He accused me of trying to punish him. I told him the date was not a weapon. It was simply a date, and someone who wanted to be married was going to use it. On the morning of the ceremony, Lucas appeared outside the venue. I was not there as a bride. I was there to help Mara with the flowers. Lucas stood near the parking lot, holding the ring he had returned to me. He said he had made a mistake. He said seeing me move forward had made him realize how much he loved me. I asked whether he had made that realization before or after he learned the venue was full of people who wanted to celebrate without him. He started crying. For a moment, I remembered the person who had proposed to me. Then I remembered the coffee shop, the removed ring, and the way he had asked me not to do anything irreversible while he kept every option open. I said, "You don't get to call my healing a betrayal." Mara's ceremony began 15 minutes later. Lucas left before the vows. That evening, he sent one final message. "I hope you're happy." I answered, "I am, and I hope one day you understand that happiness was never something you were allowed to postpone for me." My boyfriend left me for a coworker and told everyone I was jealous. Then the coworker contacted me with one question. "Did he tell you he was still living with you?" When Daniel ended our relationship, he said he needed honesty. That sounded reasonable until he started lying before he finished the sentence. He told me he had developed feelings for someone at work. He said nothing physical had happened, but he could not continue pretending the relationship was normal. He said he wanted to leave before he became the kind of person who cheated. I asked how long he had been having feelings for her. He said, "Not long." I asked whether she knew about me. He said, "She knows we were complicated." That answer told me everything I needed to know. Daniel moved out of our apartment 4 days later. He took his clothes, his gaming console, and the expensive coffee machine he had never paid for. He left behind a box of old photographs and a note saying he was sorry for hurting me. Within 2 weeks, people at work knew about the breakup. Daniel told them I had become controlling and suspicious. He said I had made him feel guilty for having friends. He said the coworker, Leah, had simply shown him what a healthy connection looked like. I never contacted Leah. I assumed she had heard a carefully edited version of the truth. Then, one Tuesday evening, she sent me a message. "Hi, I'm sorry to bother you. Did Daniel tell you he was still living with you when we started talking?" I stared at the message for a long time. I asked what she meant. She said Daniel had told her we were separated and only sharing an apartment temporarily because the lease was complicated. He had promised that he would move out soon. He had also told her that I knew he was seeing other people and that I was trying to win him back. Leah sent me screenshots. Some were ordinary. Others were not. Daniel had been telling her that I was unstable and that he was afraid of how I would react if he left. I asked Leah whether she knew he had been sleeping in our bedroom while messaging her from the living room. She said no. For the first time, I felt anger towards someone other than Daniel. Then I realized Leah had been lied to, too. We met at a cafe the next day. She brought a folder containing printed messages. I brought the lease, utility records, and the date-stamped email in which Daniel had asked me to keep our breakup private until he could control the narrative. We compared timelines. Daniel had not met Leah after the breakup. He had been flirting with her for 2 months while telling me he was working late. He had used the idea of a future with her to make himself feel brave enough to leave me. But he had never actually moved out until after she learned the truth. Leah did not want revenge. Neither did I. We wanted him to stop telling people that one of us had stolen him from the other. So we sent one email to our department's human resources office. Not to punish him for having a personal life, but to document that he had been spreading accusations about both of us in a workplace where we had to continue working. Then we stopped discussing him. Daniel tried everything. He sent Leah flowers. He told me he had been confused. He told our friends that we had teamed up against him because we were jealous. He even called me from the parking lot one evening and said, "You could have had me back if you had been less bitter." I replied, "I never asked for you back." That sentence seemed to hurt him more than the breakup. Months later, Leah and I were assigned to the same project. We were not best friends, and we did not pretend the situation had been funny. But we trusted each other because neither of us needed to rewrite the past to feel better about the future. Daniel eventually left the company. Before he did, he sent me a long apology. It said he had been afraid of being alone, and that he had confused attention with love. I did not respond. Leah did not respond either. A year after the breakup, we ran into him at a restaurant. He was sitting alone, looking at his phone. He noticed us and stood up as if he expected one of us to walk over. Neither of us did. We continued to our table. Daniel had wanted us to fight over him. Instead, the two people he had tried to turn against each other simply agreed that he was not worth competing for. My boyfriend Ethan broke up with me, expecting tears. When I calmly started packing, he accused me of never loving him. 3 months later, I found out what he actually wanted from my reaction. Ethan and I had been together for 4 years. We rented a small townhouse, split the bills, and had a dog named Miso, who somehow belonged equally to both of us, even though I was the one who remembered every vet appointment. The first sign that something had changed was his reaction to my promotion. I had worked for it for years. When my manager announced that I would lead a new team, I came home excited. Ethan congratulated me, but it sounded like an obligation. Then he asked whether the promotion meant I would travel more. I said it might, but we would figure it out together. He nodded and said, "That's what you always say. We'll figure it out together. You never actually ask what I want." For the next few weeks, he picked arguments over tiny things, the grocery list, the dog's food, and the way I loaded the dishwasher. Every disagreement somehow became evidence that I was controlling his life. When I asked him to tell me what he really wanted, he said he didn't know. Then one Sunday night, he sat me down and gave me a speech that sounded rehearsed. He said he had lost himself in the relationship. He said my career had become more important than his. He said he needed to be free and figure out who he was without me. I listened until he finished, then asked, "Are you breaking up with me?" He looked surprised that I had simplified it. "Yes," he said, "I am." I took a breath and said, "Okay, I'll start moving my things tomorrow." The silence afterward was so complete that I could hear the refrigerator turn on. Ethan stared at me. "That's it? You said you wanted to end the relationship. I expected you to have something to say." "I do, I'm hurt, but I'm not going to argue with someone who has already decided." He stood up, pushed his chair back, and told me I was being cold. By midnight, he had texted 2 of our mutual friends. Somehow the story became that I had reacted like I was relieved to be rid of him. The next morning, I took Miso to my sister's house and started packing. Ethan followed me from room to room, asking whether I had ever loved him at all. Every answer became another accusation. Finally, I said, "You wanted freedom. I'm giving you freedom." I moved into a small apartment across town. I left the townhouse clean, paid my half of the final utilities, and sent Ethan a spreadsheet showing exactly what was owed. He never replied. A week later, he posted a photo with a woman from his office. The caption said, "New beginnings." I didn't comment. I didn't ask who she was. I didn't even look at the photo twice. That was when Ethan began calling. At first, he wanted to know whether I was really moving on. Then he wanted to talk about Miso. Then he wanted to know whether I had told anyone he was seeing someone else before the breakup. I hadn't. I didn't need to. 3 months later, I received an email from our old landlord. Ethan wanted to renew the townhouse, but he couldn't afford it alone. He had told the landlord that I was still emotionally involved and would probably help with the payments. I replied with one sentence, "No. The relationship ended on the date Ethan ended it, and I have no continuing obligation under the new lease." That evening, Ethan called furious. He said I had abandoned him. He said I knew he was struggling. He said if I had really loved him, I would help him through the transition. I reminded him that he had chosen the transition. Then he went quiet and said, "I thought you would fight for us." That was the truth. He had not only wanted to leave. He wanted proof that leaving would make me panic. He wanted to feel powerful enough to be begged for. I said, "You gave me a decision. I believed you." He never called again. A year later, I ran into him at a grocery store. He asked whether I had ever missed him. I told him the truth. "I missed who I thought you were," I said. "I don't miss being tested." Then I picked up Miso's favorite treats and walked away.